Hey guys, this is Sid, and you are watching Die Hard Wrestling.
I'm live here today with Sid. Sid, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
I got to ask you right off the bat, what was your decision to leave WCW back in '91 when they offered you the title?
See, what happened, guys, is if I'm not mistaken, because I'm bad with dates, all right, Dusty had come in and was taking over as the new booker. He said, Sid, what we want you to do, we want you to sign a new deal for extended 4 years, because because I'm new, I'm coming in, and I want you to be sure I have you here, and that's just business, to be sure that he can trust someone to be there for the next 4 years, which I was greatly honored that someone like Dusty Rhodes would come in and want me to be the guy that help him out. But I don't know if it's silliness or it wasn't cockiness for sure, but just it was the first chance when you're in the middle of negotiations to be able to talk to someone else, and this is just the way I felt at this time. I felt like that Hogan was at the end of his run there in WWF. That was in my dream. That was the position I wanted. That's what I was working for the whole time. I didn't think it would come that quick. So I just picked up the phone and called, Connecticut, Titan Sports office, asked to speak to Vince McMahon, picked up the phone right away. He said, what's going on? I told him. He said, well, I got a flight for you to leave out at 3 o'clock. We'll pick you up and bring you to the office. So we went in, we talked, and went back home. By the time I got back home, I was living in Atlanta at the time. They'd called and had talked to my wife, and WCW even came up with more money to keep me there. And this is a funny story, not funny but true. So I said, well, I'm not going to call Vince back. I don't want to act like I'm playing, the middle of the deal to try to get the best deal, because truthfully at the time there was no guaranteed money with Vince. You had to sort of come in and take what you got or what you were able to make. And so having all this guaranteed money, I said, well, I'm not going to do that. So I was walking out the door, the phone rings, my wife picks it up and says, it's Vince McMahon. So I go back over the phone, I say, Mr. McMahon, I said, he said, are you on the way to sign that contract? I said, yes, sir, I am. I said, I didn't want to call you back because I didn't want you to think or anyone else to think that I'm playing them in the middle or try to play someone for a fool. He said, no, I don't think that at all. But he says, I want you to know, Sid, all the things I offered you, and that was the top spot and everything that come with the top spot, I can't guarantee you this will be here for you next time around. So it's like, oh, shit, if I'm going to go for this, and I was, I thought I was ready. So I went ahead and went for that, and that's when I went up for work for Vince and those guys.
So basically, it could have been a now or never situation, and you went with it.
And I did.
That was a great decision.
I thought it was, and I still don't regret it.
Well, that's great. What is your side of the story regarding the infamous kick out of Hulk Hogan's leg drop finish at WrestleMania 8?
The thing about that was, this is something. This is what was the beginning of the end for me with the WWF. I was told I was going to kick out of that finish and give him my finish, and I was going to win. I was going to be put over, because this is what it was supposed to have been. When I first went in, they were doing this deal with me. If y'all remember, they were doing little visions of me on TV, and then not saying who he was or this or that. Then they brought me in, and the theory of the whole thing was I was going to do only TVs and pay-per-views for 1 year, go into WrestleMania, win the championship, and then start house shows. I think that still sounds like a pretty good idea. But what happened in between all that, I'm not for sure, so I won't make up my own opinion. But they changed it. They want to make me a heel. I said, well, okay, if I'm going to be a heel, we'll change a few things. And they said, sure. So anyway, we got to WrestleMania, the finish changed. And that's when I wanted to get out of there.
I can imagine so.
Yeah.
And was Papa Shango late for the run-in, or is that another story? I was just curious if Whippleman caused the DQ to avoid any other heat with Hogan.
No, that was all predetermined.
It was all okay.
Yeah.
Some say you were unhappy with the WWE environment. Others say you had been caught cheating on a drug test after WrestleMania. Was it your side of the what was your side of the story regarding your immediate departure?
No, I wasn't caught cheating. The thing was, this is what happened was, after WrestleMania, what actually happened, it was before WrestleMania. It was in Albany. to set up for WrestleMania. If you guys remember, we had some type of, and it might have been a pay-per-view, but I thought it was a television, to where Flair came out from behind and douched me over the top.
I remember that.
All right. So what happened was this is what happened immediately after. We went to the back. Hogan's mad because they were booing him. I felt like, he said that it was like I set him up or Vince set him up. So I went right in the office and said, Vince, and this was true. I was really young at the time. I said, Vince, I really appreciate the opportunity that you've given me here, but I'm not ready for this. And I wasn't. I wasn't ready for that type of environment, in which WCW is sort of like and I hate saying this in a corny way, but it was more of a family environment. It was more a trustful environment. I didn't have to worry about, people not liking me, because, things like that. It just wasn't, it was two different organizations. So, and I'm, the first to admit my weaknesses, and I wasn't ready to battle with all the political stuff. So I went to Vince in Albany. This was way before WrestleMania, and I went to Vince with my hand. I said, I want to shake hands, and I want to go home. And truthfully, between us, I already had a deal already worked out to go back to WCW. But he wouldn't do it, and he said, at least, then I said, well, only thing I can promise you, I'll stay here till WrestleMania.
So more or less at the time, WWE was more of a business type of a situation, and WCW was more family-oriented. Right,
and the thing about WWF at that time, too, is like, again, is just, I'm not saying there's no one there dishonest. I'm no country boy, guys, from Arkansas. I live on my word and a handshake, which Vince, everything he promised me, he did for me. And if I needed more money, he gave me a better percentage. And so everything was good on that aspect. It's just that I didn't want people like Hogan, just because they were booing him and cheering me. There was nobody set nothing up at that. That's just the way it came out. But I felt bad, and I felt like people was like, maybe Sid's a bad guy, or maybe he's the one causing all these troubles. So I didn't want that anymore. I wanted just to go home and start over. And I even told Vince, I said, when I grow up, maybe I can come back and do a better job for you.
That's understandable. What was the topic of conversation that started the infamous argument between you and Arn Anderson in the UK?
Believe it or not, it was this. We were sitting there talking. We hadn't had any sleep for about 15 days almost. Just that's a little exaggeration. But we were sitting in there waiting for our food, and the topic is always brought up there, what was wrong with our territory. Because we had great talent. It's just the people weren't coming out to the house shows. And I said what everybody else was saying, but I said it for the first time. I said, well, the problem here is that Flair won't step aside, or not step aside, but just ease to the side and let a few other guys come in and do some things to get over. Because at the time, guys, if y'all remember, if anybody else remembers, I was over like $1 million there. And they were ready to put the strap on me and do all these great things with me, which was going to happen because Dusty was there. And that's really what started the argument.
Wow. At one time, the altercation on Anderson, were you ever concerned with the seriousness of the injuries and how they could have been potentially fatal? I mean, once and said, have you any regrets for that?
The only regret I have over that is that it happened. Arn is one of the greatest human beings I've ever got to be associated with. And I'm gonna give you a real quick scenario. Or like whenever I was involved with the Horsemen and situations where we were in tag matches and stuff like that, Flair and Barry Windham, they would go with all these other guys and they would get their spot set up, and I'd ask them, hey, what do you all want me to do? Figure it out. I'm a young guy. Really, I don't know that much at this time. I really didn't. And so Arn would be the first person to come to me and say, Sid, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. And then when it come to interview time, Sid, I said, Arn, I'm too nervous. I can't talk. I'm not a good talker. He goes, well, you will be. This is what I want you just to say this, Sid. And then I was started there, and then he moved me on and moved me on. So the biggest regret out of the whole thing was that here's the guy that really went out of his way to help me, and then this horrible thing happened between the two of us, and it really was an alcohol-induced, exhausted deal. He didn't mean any of it, I know, and it's just a whole regrettable thing. It's something I wish had never happened. And the reason I wish it wouldn't happen, I wish it hadn't happened, and if I had to happen, I wish it hadn't ever been him.
Him of all people, overall it was bad timing.
It was just bad timing, and it's just, like I said, and I wouldn't want to get in any type of altercation with anyone, but he would be the last person because he was so good to me.
I understand. I appreciate your honesty in that. When you returned to WCW, were you concerned with how you would be received by Arn Anderson? Did you and Arn Anderson have a moment to patch up the differences?
We did. It was still a little bit of a weird deal there. They brought me in No one knew I was coming in. Actually, Eric was flying his small plane into my hometown to negotiate a deal, my new deal coming in, and we kept it totally secret. And it was in Baltimore at a pay-per-view. They brought me in the black pants, black shirt, long sleeves, a black hood and everything, and they were going to wait to TV to expose who I was, but then they changed their mind at the last second. They wanted me to do it at the pay-per-view, so they brought me and Arn in a room, just like we're sitting right here. Arn, being the gentleman he is, he knew this thing wasn't something I had. It wasn't nothing personal I had against him, or nothing personal he had against me. It was just it was just a bad timing situation. But we did have a few minutes to patch things up, and from that second on, Arn was as good as to me as anybody in this business.
There was smooth sailing.
It was great.
That's great.
And I felt good too. Some of the guilt that I had actually was lifted off of me by Arn. But saying, Sid, I forgive you. It was something bad. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't my fault. Let's move on. And from that day on, me and Arn was just like that again.
Like a tremendous weight lifted off your shoulders.
It was the biggest weight lifted off of my shoulders.
That's important. What are your thoughts on the fans' reaction to supporting you as a monster heel during your attacks on the top babyface and Shawn Michaels? And also, do you find it was funny that the WWE production team had to drown out the cheers?
And not just that. Matter of fact, day or two leading up to that pay-per-view, I was at the studio. They had some type of deal where we were taking live call-ins. They couldn't get a call-in, and they couldn't get one person to call in about Shawn. So the office was having to call in to make up calls about Shawn. I thought that was a little funny, but not so much because, guys, if anybody is watching this or hears this and have been around as long as my career and seen some of my career, up north, I've been always really I was always over like a baby face. And the reason why is because up north we know, in my opinion, the northern fans are the most educated fans in wrestling. You can't program a northern fan like Boston or New York or Philadelphia. They're going to like and dislike who they want to like or dislike, unlike the South. And so that was sort of part of my career that I enjoyed, but it didn't bother me, or I wasn't surprised. I was surprised the first time it happened, but after that, it wasn't that big of a deal.
I can attest to that because I myself know you were big on the East Coast because I was there that night.
Northeast especially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, do you have problems working with the Ultimate Warrior?
Yeah, I did. This guy was a lunatic or crazy. I'll give you a real quick scenario. This is after WrestleMania. I really wanted to quit at this point, but Vince says, "Please stay. We're going to make you we're going to make you the biggest heel in this business." Okay. I know what it is to be a big heel in this business because I had great people like Dusty Rhodes, Arn Anderson. I'm not Arn, Ole Anderson, who's, in my opinion, the smartest guy in this business of all time. I had these guys tool me and educate me how to be a heel, how to be a monster heel. And, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Basically, I was asking you if you had any problems working with the Ultimate Warrior.
Oh, yeah, the Ultimate Warrior. So here it is. We're working in Baltimore, and I come over to him. Now, here it is. I'm told him we would be the monster heel of the business. And so the deal was, we have a match. Warrior comes in, does this regular clothesline. I go out. He shakes the ropes. We have the match. Then he's going to kick out of my finish, and we're going to do some type of DQ, which to me that doesn't sound like the killer heel of the deal. But what was so funny to me was we're sitting there talking. I said, "No, Jim was his name, right?"
James Hellwig.
I said, "Jim, listen, this is the deal. I'll be in there first. You'll come in. I'll stop you. I'll clothesline you. I'll send you off. You duck my clothesline. You give me one clothesline, and then I powder." And he goes, "Will Sid, the stars tell me that the Ultimate Warrior..." And I'm thinking for sure this is a rib. I'm thinking, because in Baltimore, the dressing rooms are like cutables. They're so small. I'm going, somebody's filming this. This can't really be happening to me. But it was. So I went up to the agents and I said, I think Hepner and somebody else, Jack Lanza was one of the agents at the time. I said, "Guys, I don't know what the hell this guy's problem is, but he needs to talk to me like a regular person." So it was weird working with that guy.
Well, you're also talking about a guy who legally changed his name to Warrior.
I know, and that sort of answers everything.
It kind of says the whole story in itself. Were you surprised that the WWE could not find anything for you after the title reign ended at WrestleMania 13?
No, it wasn't that. I saw that question yesterday when I was reading through these things. It wasn't that they couldn't find anything, but this is what happened, guys. I was one of the first people ever on a guaranteed contract, and this is how it worked. I was guaranteed, let's say, $100 a year. I'm just using that for a figure. Okay, well, at the end of that, what they do, they gave me my guaranteed money, and then they underneath the check, they would say, okay, well, you didn't make $100 that night, you actually made $500 that night, okay? So that would put me $400 over what I'd already made. So at the end of the year, they would write me one check for everything that was over my guarantee. So after WrestleMania, they cooled me off to where I couldn't make any more than my guarantee. That's what they did.
So the back pay was on one check, and then from there,
they just kept me at my regular pay.
I understand. Were you disappointed when your storyline to work with Hulk Hogan in WCW was scrapped and started the New Blood gimmick?
Yes, I was, because one of the reasons, this in WCW, guys, especially when I was there, this never was a company that was known for drawing money and stuff like that. And I know me and Hogan was a great, a good mix, a good pair to draw money. And then when we did that deal, and I think it was in Miami, when they announced it the next day that the ticket sales were going on sale, it was the first time in I think WCW history they'd had like a 200 or something, or it was close to $300,000 advance. So here was my first chance to come in WCW, which I love that pressure, but it was the first time the pressure was put on me, and it looked like it was going to pay off, or at least I was going to be successful. And so that's that did bother me a little bit.
I can imagine so.
Yeah.
How did you feel putting over Chris Benoit for the WCW title the night before he left the company? And also, did anyone know he was leaving?
You know what? No. I was at the gym that day working out when Terry Taylor came over to me and said, "Hey, we're going to need you to put Chris over tonight." And nothing against Chris, because Chris is a great worker and a hard worker and a great guy and all these, all the great things you can talk about someone. But Chris is never going to be in my league, okay? And so for them to say, okay, we're going to all of a sudden take the steam off you, we're going to put it on Chris, and we're hoping Chris is going to take us to the glory land. I just thought that was a little bit disrespectful, but I didn't know the whole time until we got ready that night. Kevin Sullivan came up to me and said, okay, at the finish, when he gets the crossface on you, put your foot on the rope. I still knew at that time that they were going to fire him as he walked out the door.
Wow.
So that was, so I felt a little bit bad about it in the beginning, but then, too, guys, I don't care. I'd put you over in the middle. That's how I don't,
I'd love to see that.
Winning and losing is the same, okay? This business is a work. Now, the only difference is that when you're in a position like me or other people that, we were successful, that doesn't give me a chance to be more successful. It's not going to hurt me, by sure, because Chris is a good worker. It'd be different if I had to put over, say, Billy Kidman. That would have been devastating. But Chris being a good worker that he was and all that, I wasn't bothered at all by that. And I was still, putting someone, like, I'll give you an example. I was working Philly a few weeks ago. I was working with their champion, Two Coast Scorpio. They come over with some type of count out or DQ. I went, shit, just roll me up. Guys, and this is no exaggeration, I have volunteered to do more jobs than anybody who's done jobs.
Plus, he's also an established name, too.
Yeah, and he's an established name, and it's not going to hurt nobody.
I mean, you guys work hand in hand, and it's not winning or losing. It's putting on a good match.
It's putting on a good match, and if I didn't put him over, which it didn't really help a lot because I was the more baby face of the match, but I worked real hard to try to get the people turned a little bit through that night, and I thought that would help a little bit. And that's why I suggested it. And so, putting someone over is nothing.
Like always, I'm sure you did a hell of a job with it.
Yeah, and he did too.
I'm sure he did. Why was WCW asking you to perform high-risk moves in your match with Scott Steiner, where you subsequently suffered a career-ending injury?
Well, it's not career-ending because I'm back now, but it was close to career-ending. This is what I don't understand about this, guys. My whole career is my facial expressions, my body language, the power that I possess, things like that, my psychology. And so Johnny, who's the one that suggested this, he had been bugging me. This is something to do. I had come back 3 months before I was released from shoulder surgery. I couldn't put my wallet in my pocket. I couldn't put my belt on. I couldn't hold the rope. I couldn't put my arm back to hold the ropes. And I told Johnny this, but he had been pressuring me a month prior to that. Let's do this deal off. I said, Johnny, let me practice a couple nights in a house show and let me see how I feel with it, and then I won't mind doing it on live TV. So when they finally did write it in, what it was a spot that was in production deal. I was supposed to do that spot, and then they were going to pan to the back to pick up the mystery partner, coming in, who wasn't going to be my partner after all anyway. They all three were going to beat me up. But it's just silly. For someone to think that one spot is going to change the business shows that guy doesn't have a clue for the business.
It's a lot more than just one little spot.
It takes a lot more than one spot.
Exactly. If you had a choice, how would you have wanted to end your career? Well, actually, I shouldn't ask you that because you are coming back. But at the time, I should say.
Well, what I really wanted to do is this, guys. I'd already talked to Vince Russo about a new gimmick. We got to be realistic. Sid Vicious, a Psycho Sid, or whatever, Sid Justice. These are normal characters, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to come to the front of the game and try to change my gimmick and come up with something really cool and strong and end my career. And so I was going to pitch it to WCW, and I was also at the end of my contract, I was going to pitch it to Vince and see who was going to buy this gimmick from me or buy it to let me do it. And that's why I wanted it in the career. I wanted it in it on a positive note, something really, fun and something different. And the thing, too, the business was hurting. So I said, well, if I can do something different with myself, to help the business, I'll be the first to do that.
Now that you're making the comeback on the trail, do you think there's a possibility you can come on to TNA?
You know what? I love the TNA show. I get to watch it once in a while. But, that'll be my last resort. Reason why, guys, is because the deal with the WWE, there's the place I can fulfill my dreams. I can, get back in front of some really large crowds, and that's what I want to do. That's my deal. I love to be responsible for 80,000 people in that arena, and that's the only place that I can do that.
Well, Sid, I, for one, hope you come back real soon. I would love to see you back in WWE, and I also appreciate your time.
Sure, and thank you guys for having me.
And that's all we have for now.
Can you dig it?